Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, dear friends, welcome to the next block of the day 5 of Microtones. Microtöne, small is beautiful. And I'm going to take the moderation in this block. And it's my pleasure to present now our next presentation. Called the Microtonal Capacities of Selected Instruments of the Logos Robot Orchestra by Christian Klinkenberg, a dear friend of the International Ecumenical Society in Salzburg. And Christian Klinkenberg was born in Eupen in Belgium in 1976. Christian Klinkenberg earned a master's degree in jazz in 2006 and classical composition in 2012 and a PhD in arts in 2020. The music of Christian Klinkenberg is characterized by the combination of contemporary composition concepts and improvisation. He teaches in Luxembourg and in Belgium, conducts his own orchestra, and is a founding member of the group KLX. Alongside his work as a composer and teacher, Klinkenberg has continued actively as a pianist, band leader, and improviser with different performances and ensembles. Christian Klinkenberg composed a microtonal ballet, 2 microtonal operas, and numerous microtonal compositions for smaller ensembles. A special focus is on the simultaneous use of different microtonal scales. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Christian Klinkenberg. Hello, Christian.
Yes, hello. You've got my
yes, I just
video.
Yeah, and we see you. Of course, everything is ready there.
Yes, okay.
To see you. Okay, we might see you later.
Orchestra. Hello, I'd like to talk about the Logos Orchestra. It's a collection of robots situated in Ghent in Belgium. And a few months ago I was asked to compose a piece for that orchestra together with live musicians. The name of the piece will be Gleichmachung. It's not yet finished, it's work in progress, but that allowed me to do a lot of research concerning the microtonal capacities of the instruments. And I did some categories and some research how it works. First, some general information. So it's the world's largest collection of robot instruments. There are more than 60 robots and they are based in Ghent. All robots are fully acoustic. There are no electronic sounds, no amplification, full dynamic control, and in comparison to a synthesizer, full polyphony. Everything is controllable via MIDI. And some of them, that's why I'm interested, have also microtonal capacities. That might be interesting for our community. All composers are warmly invited to compose pieces for the robot orchestra. On my first visit to Ghent, they showed me all the instruments that I might be interested in. So now concerning the microtonal instruments, I try to make some categories. First category, as we see here, are the quarter tone instruments. Then I have the microtonal instruments without steps, stepless, polyphonic. And the third category, also stepless microtonality, this time monophonic. They are controlled via MIDI. There are two possibilities concerning the technique they used. quarter tones are on separate MIDI channels. Example, equal tempo notes on MIDI channel 15 and quarter tones above on MIDI channel 16. Second possibility, it's on the same MIDI channel but 4 octaves lower. So here comes the first microtonal instrument, QT for quarter tone. So this is a 6 octave organ. We have 2 different MIDI channels again here, 5 for the equal tempered pitches and 6 for the quarter tones. This is the range. You can find all this information on the website. Now we're going to listen to some compositions. The first one is by Gottfried Wilhelm Raas. Then we hear an arrangement of De Vlaamse, a quarter tone version of the well-known piece The Flemish Lion. And finally, De Bagatelle pour QT. The second instrument is the tubie. I already told you that some instruments work with different MIDI channels concerning the quarter tones, and there are others, they are working with the range. That means in this case it's the quarter tones are just 4 octaves lower. This is the range. I don't have any audio example for the tubie, so we go on to the XI, like xylophone. The range is 3.5 octaves and it's mapped on 2 different MIDI channels. So now we are going to listen a composition by Xavier Verhelst. We're going to the second category. We're talking about microtonality, but this time stepless. There are quarter tones possible, but also smaller deviations. And these are the polyphonic instruments. There are two possibilities generating the microtonal pitches. First one is by pitch bend MIDI control, and the second possibility for other instruments is key pressure. Some of the composers work often with sequencers, others not so often, so that's why I'm going to show how to create these pitch bends or key pressures. So here we have Ableton. We can see we have to push this button. E is for envelope, and we can simply draw inside the MIDI clip. There's that line, and we can change the value. Here we can change the controller. We can choose pitch bend, key pressure, or whatever we want. The next sequencer is also well known for Apple users. It's Logic. Reaper is also sequencer, very cheap but still really good. And then we have the notation software, Finale. We just choose a pitch, and we choose the dynamics control. And then we just create a dynamic. We go to playback, and there in the type we choose pitch bend, and we can give a value. But you have to know one thing. It is different from other sequencers. The values are different. First instrument with stepless microtonality is the Hybrid. Here we use the key pressure for the microtonal deviations. Concerning the values, 64 is the standard pitch, and then you can pitch down, or up to 127 upwards. Of course, you have to reset it if you want to have the standard pitch again. This is an example by Christoph Lauers. The second instrument in that category is the hybrid high, just a higher pitched instrument, and we use key pressure as a control change to control the microtonal pitches. Last year I was in Ghent, and as I told you, I recorded some videos. Lara showed me some of the instruments. Op welke manier? Dan met pitchbend of? Pitchbend en vibrato. Dit is nu met vibrato. So modulation wheel. Mm-hmm. En dit was nu tremolo. Tremolo, ja. Ja, oké. Nee, met tremolo controller. Ja. Oké. Je kan het gebruiken als The P is a very high-pitched instrument. We will also hear an example composed by Gottfried Wilhelm Raas. There's also a second version of the P. It's the 2P. Then we have the next category, the third one, the monophonic instruments with stepless microtonality. The first one is the alto sax. We use the pitch bend for the quarter tone deviation and the key pressure for different fingerings. Then we have the sousaphone, a bono, a trombone, a cornet, and finally an oboe. Now we hear the last example composed by Christoph Flowers. Thank you very much.
Hello, Christian. Good to see
Hello.
you.
Hi.
Yeah. What
Thank you very
a
much.
very special project, actually. A great surprise, yeah. But yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun, actually. So I would like. We have plenty of time. Thank you that you that your timing is really nice. I don't have to bother you at all. Thank you for making things very easy. And I would like to ask in the group if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, we would like to throw a couple of them if time allows. Anyone in the group? Okay, I think it's really a great project. And I think to experiment for young composers who are still like getting new ideas, new sounds, I think it can be really, can make really an impression or influence for future other projects. Yeah, I loved the last piece the best. I mean, this for seven instruments. I think that was amazing, actually. But sometimes, yeah, of course, I mean, if I had to go there for a residence as a composer, one of my first questions would be the technical level of these musicians, robot musicians. Okay, are they, yeah, I mean, sometimes you hear, but I'm not sure in which, I mean, if you, in a professional way, I mean, if you compare to professional musicians, physical musicians, in which level can man write for them, actually?
Yes, of course, there are a lot of possibilities with all the control changes. I think that's a lot. You have to check also if you are there. So you have to work with the instruments. I think that's important because otherwise you don't know. Of course, you have the possibility to change a lot of things with the controllers. So you have to be there and try out how the instrument reacts. There are a lot of possibilities concerning virtuoso things and things that might not be possible with musicians, of course, because it's there are so many possibilities, and also timing-wise, everything is possible to play very fast, very low, very high, even lower than other instruments. But of course, in terms of musicality, you have to work as a composer in the sequencer, and you have to check it.
Yes, you have to control yourself. And also another thing, yeah, especially by the wind instruments, I mean, what about like extended techniques? I mean, I think any composer would ask, also one of the first questions before residence would be, okay, which extended techniques, I mean, microtonality, of course, I mean, I think it's you have really a lot of possibilities for microtones. But apart from this, could you tell us about your experiences? I mean, you are now kind of writing a work in progress.
That's true. That's a work in progress. But of course, one improvement is, of course, the extended range of the instruments already. The range that is not possible for, maybe it's possible for some musicians, but it's interesting to work with that. What I also like is that I can combine it, working with real musicians and together with the robots.
I think,
but of course, there's also one thing is also the key change, the fingerings you can change. So you can with the key pressure, you can say they should trumpet or something like should use different fingerings for the same pitch. It's also really interesting. Okay. There is also a lot for me to learn for other possibilities.
Excuse me. Yeah, so actually, I mean, I believe this project, you could be, I mean, as far as I know you, for stage projects, for theater music pieces, I mean, it's my picture of you and this project. I think it would, you could develop your creativity in a very unlimited way. That's my feeling, actually. And
that's true.
Thinking so, like in stage projects with these buddies.
Yeah, that's it's of course really interesting because you have the theme of my newer project is always about computer, and so there's one project in the far future now because it has been postponed a lot because of COVID. That's 1984. But before 1984, I will do some other things that is also has to do something with computer, robots. It's a cyberpunk project, and now this Gleichmachung is also about yes, it's about controlling. And so we have always that contrast between the computer controlling the instruments and human being controlling the instruments. And another thing is for me really interesting. I want to play with that live musicians play something, and we have the possibility nowadays with MaxMSP to analyze what they are playing and to transform it into MIDI.
Yes.
So we have a communication between. And the idea of the composition I'm doing at the moment is that the human control the computers or the robots, and the end, the robots control the humans.
Well, yes, it's a big topic for, I think for artists that we are very sensitive. I mean, not so many people, of course, with this topic, but yeah, it's good that you're using it. And then, yeah, about also computer. Okay, otherwise, group, raise your hand. Okay, Hans-Günther Lock. May I ask one last question, Hans-Günther? Because you mentioned computer. I think it was with the pipes. I think on the list, the fourth instrument, I forgot the name actually. I see. Actually, what are the benefits when I hear? I mean, if I didn't know about this project and I hear this on the radio, I come late and I just hear 2 minutes of this. I wouldn't tell it's a robot orchestra, a robot instrument. So actually, what are the benefits for you as a composer? As an artist, to use these physical robots rather than the computer, because there was a lot of manipulation anyway from the pipes, I believe.
Yes, it's really acoustic. That's the benefit. Of course, you can work with synthesizers. It's also really interesting. That's working with synthesizers, but in an acoustic way. It's the same way to work, but of course, as I said at the beginning, we have in synthesizers, you have often limited polyphony. Here you have full polyphony. And it sounds sometimes like there are instruments that sounds a little bit like synthesizers, but yes, you can work a little bit in that way. Really interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I believe, I mean, for sure, if you are live with these instruments, your perception is completely different. I mean, I think it's a very important thing to be there, to be live.
Yes, of course, there's another possibility, of course, to control them directly with a keyboard or something like that, or with another control, wind controller or something. That's also possible. So you can be a composer or an improviser.
Wow, we are very much looking forward to. I'm sorry, I'm taking Günther. Yeah, excuse me, please go ahead, Günther.
Yeah, thank you, Christian, very much for this very interesting project, and nice to see you here again. And of course, I made also this experience that you have something what is it is hybrid. It is a little bit like electronic music, but you have real sounding bodies, and that will produce an completely different a sound field what a loudspeaker is not able to produce, and of course that in recordings you cannot recognize that. And of course I have but of course these devices like these robots, of course if you have this they are not everywhere accessible, and of course I built a robotic recorder by myself, what is tuned in ball amperes, and of course it is a prototype, and I'm not an engineer, and so a little bit amateur knowledge of if you are able to make a little bit soldering and able to program an Arduino, then you can maybe make some things like that. But of course it is sometimes tricky because little changes and some things I hold stored in my studio, and of course if I want to reactivate it needs maybe a week to figure out to get all solenoids work properly. But the experience what I have made with these instruments was very interesting. Of course the problem is of course to program like gestures like humans. Maybe that should not be the goal maybe for us as composers. It's more that we have these more quicker access, and of course maybe sometimes I haven't done that. We have in Perno we have an organ what is midified. So midified church organ is something what comes more and more, and there you can do things like that. But my question is now, what is with both string instruments? Because I'm actually they are really hard to control, because you need very sensitive system. And as I have not googled in the last time, so the Japanese humanoid robot violinist, that sounds awful, and for me until now the best realization is the for violins or for both string instruments I have seen in this the video from this violin automata in the this museum in Utrecht, I think it was, and so that a mechanical device is it seemed, if I'm not maybe I'm not up to date, but my mechanical design device is much better as all what I could found about both string in what is maybe published in YouTube.
Yes, I haven't seen a string instrument yet. That would be a question to the developers of the robots, of course. Really interesting. Of course, it's really yes, concerning the intonation-wise, I don't know, but concerning the humanity, bringing it inside for the string, for violin or something, that might be really hard. I'm sure. But so I can't see. I don't know. I haven't seen a violin or any other bowed string instrument. So I have seen a bass guitar electric bass guitar, but picked and not bowed.
Excuse me.
Of course.
Continue this conversation. Can we continue this conversation? I'm sorry, Hans Günther. It's partly my fault. I took myself too much time from the question time, because we are 2 minutes over the time, and I would like thank you very much, Christian, and keep updated.
Sorry for my too long statement.
No, I took like 7 minutes. Sorry. Next time, yeah, that's why I prefer to go first with you. And so our next presentation, it's from our dear Jim Dalton, and it's going to be a software instrument and tool for just intonation in MaxMSP. Dalton has been a professor of music theory at the Boston Conservatory at Berkeley since 2000, including courses in temperament and just in intonation practice. As a music theorist, Dalton's research has ranged from palindromes to just intonation. He has presented at conferences in the US and Europe, including the Society for American Music Beyond the Semitone in Aberdeen, Scotland, the International Music Theory Conference in Vilnius, and Nova Contemporary Music Meeting in Lisbon. Dalton's compositions have been performed throughout the States, Canada, and Europe by the Toronto Camerata, Ensemble Decadence, Transients Canvas, Scottish Voices, Sharon Leventhal, Stephen Althoff, Paul Ayers, Aaron Kaplan, Carson Coman, Donald Bowstead, and Michael Nix at such venues as Kansas Symposium for New Music, Musique Nouvelle in Lunel, Euro Microfest Sound, and Académie des Atonkus in Darmstadt. Dalton performs on guitar, mandolin, and banjo with the soprano Maggie Smith-Dalton. He freelances in orchestral, chamber music, new music, and opera, and has played with such orchestras as the Macao Orchestra in China and Orquesta Filarmónica de Jalisco in Guadalajara, Mexico. Dalton contributed to music in American Life, ABC, Clio, and Banjo Root and Branches, University of Illinois Press, 2018. Dalton studied at Rutgers University and the University of Idaho. He studied composition with George Walker, Louis White, and Neely Bruce, and guitar with Michael Newman and John Abercrombie. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jim Dalton.
Thank you. I'm going to share my slides, and I should begin. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me here. I was supposed to present in 2017, and I had some health issues at the time, and so it's unfortunately, I mean, I would have been very happy to be in person this year, but we're unable to do that. Can you see this okay? My slides?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, good. So I should preface my talk about this software by saying that I'm relatively new myself to programming in Max, and there may be some much more elegant or efficient ways of doing some of these things, but I'm at the beginning of the process with this, and the conservatory, the Boston Conservatory, has given me a sabbatical to work on this project for the fall semester, so I'm going to be putting a lot more time in on it over the next few months. So the idea traces back to the American composer Lou Harrison, and this is an idea that comes from his primer, and I'll give you this is the page from it. The basic idea that inspired me for this is the idea of freestyle just intonation. And he talks about it on the page on the left there. And essentially, he says that there are two ways when you compose with just intervals. There are two ways of composing. One is to select the scale or the gamut that you're going to use ahead of time and to compose within that gamut or within that scale. And the other way is to compose what he calls in freestyle, choosing your intervals as you go without any regard to a particular scale or gamut. And he gives a little example here from his symphony in freestyle, which I'll show you another page of that later. But he shows that this is an expanding sequence of pitches. So here are a couple of other quotes by him about this. From some other sources where he was talking about this. My favorite one is the last quote here where he says, "Just incidentally, when Harry Partch realized what I was up to in using this method, he said that it made him dizzy." And from a few others about this, actually what Joel Taylor says here is very important. That this privileges interval over pitch class, and that you're able to achieve dissonant results by consonant means. So let's take a look at this example. This is from his Symphony in Freestyle, one of only 4 works that Harrison composed using freestyle. This was his first one in 1955. And he has that opening sequence of expanding intervals at the beginning. And keep in mind, too, that the ratios represent the interval between pitches in this case, and not as Harry Partch might do, not representing the pitch themselves, right? So Harry Partch would take G as 1-1, and then D would be 3-2, and B would be 5-4, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, the 10-9 refers to the distance between the G and the A, and the 9-8 to the distance between the A and the B, et cetera, et cetera. And an important part of what is going on here, too, is seen between the 2 flute parts, the first flute and the second flute. The second flute imitates the first flute in exactly the same intervals, right? Exactly the same intervals, but with a different starting pitch. This is really important. Now, I should clarify one other thing. When Harrison talks about freestyle, what he's talking about is the act of composing, not the way that it's played, although it does affect the way it's played. So in other words, the flute players in this case do not have to find these pitches, because they're supposed to be playing on individually specially made flutes that are tuned to the pitches that they need. Now, this takes a few different, I think it requires 3 flute players, if I remember correctly. Johnny Reinhardt would be able to speak to that a little better, because he organized the first performance of this piece with actual instruments. But it requires several different flutes played by each flute player to manage to accommodate all of the pitches of the composition. The harp is pre-tuned in advance to the intervals that are needed, but the composer is working freely with intervals rather than with scales. Okay, here's the third of his, actually the fourth the fourth of his pieces, and the last that he completed in this style. This is the entire score of this one. It's only a few seconds long. It was recorded by the composer and his partner and a friend in his living room, the only performance of the piece. But what we're dealing with here is a slightly different approach to dealing with intervals. I did an analysis of this for another conference and found that this piece is really based on various different ways of dividing fourths and different tetrachords. And if you look at the beginning of the metal strung harp, the first four notes of the metal strung harp part, that is Ibn Sina's tetrachord, enharmonic tetrachord, and the next few pitches, starting on the B flat, those represent the chromatic tetrachord of Didymus. So what Harrison is doing here is playing with different tetrachords and different ways of dividing the fourth. If you look at the Ya-Cheng parts on the top staff of the system, you see that the interval of a fourth is divided into a 7/6 and an 8/7. Okay, so here's the recording of it. And just for your information, the other two compositions that he wrote using the freestyle method were At the Tomb of Charles Ives, which he wrote in the early 1960s, and the vocal recitatives for a piece called Political Primer. And those were the only things that he wrote in this style. Okay. So now getting to the software, my challenge was to create an instrument that will facilitate composition and experimentation in freestyle just intonation. As you might imagine, I mean, there are not many ways to play around with the intervals in that way. I mean, I'm primarily a guitarist. I have a fair amount of piano background. You cannot do this with either of those instruments in any easy way. You know, there are various things you could do, but I was looking for something that would really make this a lot easier. And then the other considerations for what I'm trying to do, because I've been teaching for so long, I always think about what I could do to use this in education as well. So I was thinking if I could make this have be easy enough to use, then it would facilitate the use of it for teaching my students in theory classes or in ear training classes. I was looking for minimal cost, using the laptop as a controller, just to keep things simple, to have as many user-determined parameters as possible. And I wanted it to be useful from a composing point of view, to be able to test concepts and melodies, to be able to improvise with these intervals a bit. And especially considering the complexity that might arise from some of these compositions, making reference recordings, intonational reference recordings for performers. I love to write vocal music. Singers shy away from things like this if they don't have a little bit of help in in being able to learn the intervals. And then, of course, its effectiveness as a tool for education, especially for ear training. So to figure out how to do this, basically what has to happen is the keystrokes, instead of giving you a specific pitch, the keystrokes have to move the pitch a specific interval to the next pitch. So, in other words, when I push down a key, I don't want that key to give me a G sharp, for example. I want that key to give me a major third above the previous note, or a major third below, or a small or a large just semitone, or a small, or, et cetera, et cetera. And the way to manage that is to have the frequency of one pitch multiplied by the ratio of the of the interval that we want to move in order to create the next pitch. So, if you look at the bottom three rectangles here, you see an abstraction of a synthesizer. The basic concept of a synthesizer is the frequency. You tell the oscillator what frequency to produce, and the oscillator sends that frequency to the digital to analog converter, right, or to the speaker. So that's the basic idea of a synthesizer. But what we want to have happen here is we want to take that frequency, and in order to give the next pitch, the frequency goes up to the multiply function, and it's multiplied by the interval ratio that we need for the next pitch, and that produces that pitch, sends it to the oscillator, and at the same time sends it back around to be multiplied by the next interval ratio. And that's the core concept. As I was starting to learn how to use Max, one day it just occurred to me that I could probably make this happen. So here is the basic core function as it looks in Max. Again, like I said, I'm relatively new to Max, so there may be more elegant ways of doing this, but this is what I came up with. If you look at the bottom, you see the thing that says cycle in it, cycle tilde 440. That's a sine oscillator, and that goes to the gain, which goes to the digital analog converter. Above that is the frequency, and I started that on the number 440. I started that at 440. That's controlling the sine oscillator. And you see that the one of the virtual cables, we'll call it a virtual patch cable, comes out of the frequency box and circles back around to the multiply box to be multiplied times 1.5, which is the 3.2 frequency, or this brings it up a perfect, a just fifth, right? A 3.2. So what you see now is, you see it says frequency 660. That is the state that it's in after hitting the button, which is the top thing at the left, which sent the 1.5 to the multiply function. So it took the 440, the existing 440, and it changed the frequency to 660, thereby going up a 3.2. So that's the basic core function. This is what it looked like in the state that I had it a few days ago. There are a few improvements here and a lot of other intervals. All of that stuff at the top, those are the intervals that I have listed above it, 2, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, 4. on the first row, and the second row is the descending form of those same intervals. Okay. The little boxes that say select, those boxes are there to register my keystrokes to activate each of those intervals. So in other words, it says select 49. That is the one key in the top row of the laptop, et cetera, et cetera. If you look over on the left, I've given myself a syntonic comma up and down. The core function is near the center bottom. And I also, again, keep in mind, this is just the beginnings of things. So I have a sine wave, and then I have a sawtooth wave, and the stuff at the bottom right-hand side is really just there to select between those two waveforms. What else did I do? Near where it says core function, you see the load bang. Load bang sets it to 440 whenever I open it up, whenever I open the program. And I have that connected to the tab key. That's connected to the return key so that I can return to 440 whenever I wish. That can be changed, of course, at any time. But that's the state that I had it in a few days ago. So my next steps, and I will demonstrate this in a few minutes, but I want to get through the rest of the description of it first. The next steps, I need to select all of the intervals that I would want to have for this and determine the best keyboard mappings. The keyboard mappings are very important, as you might imagine. I mean, I already changed my mind about some things. I was thinking originally of having the shift key give me the interval descending, and I decided against that because it's a little unwieldy. That's why I made the descending on the next row of keys below the ascending interval, because then you could go back and forth. You could make a trill, or you could repeat notes much more easily. And another thing I want to do is create a standalone package for this so that my students or anybody else who wants to use this don't have to have the entire Max program. So I could create something that I could give to my students or to musicians that are going to play my pieces and want to have this to assist with the intonation, with studying the intervals, and they don't have to purchase the entire program. The other things that I want to explore is having presets to have a number of different sets of intervals that are possible. Other types of sound production, I mean, obviously a sine wave and a sawtooth wave, that's pretty limited. There are a lot of other things we could do. You could put almost any kind of synthesis, any kind of production of sound that I can put in there might make this a little more musical, and maybe it would be possible to use it as a performance instrument or to compose fixed media. And the next thing is related to that, making it more expressive in some ways, and being able to map to other kinds of controllers. Obviously, that's something that's quite possible, but that would be another step that I would take later on. A bibliography, and I'd be happy to share this later with anybody that is interested. And I'm going to stop this share and share the share the program itself and demonstrate it for you. All right, so this is the state that I have it in currently. I've kind of randomly added a few intervals that I needed to play with some of the phrases that are in the Harrison compositions that that we were looking at. And I know I was going to say something else about this, but I don't remember what right now. So, all right, I'll just demonstrate it, and we'll see what else arises as I do that. What I did too here, you see select 32. I put that is the space bar, and the space bar I chose that because I'm thinking of that as being able to create rests as well as being on and off for this. So I have it set now for a sine wave, but I'm going to return it to 440. Okay. Essentially, what happens here is as I hit the key that that selects the ascending 3-2, it just multiplies the existing pitch by 3-2, and it goes up a fifth like that, or down a fifth if I take the next row of keys. You can do things, for example, I'm thinking now of demonstrating to students some of the issues around commas, for example. You probably know that famous section, the sequence of notes that Huygens describes, saying that if you go up a fourth, down a minor third. I should do this in ratios instead. Up 4-3, down 6-5, up 4-3, down 3-2. You end up being a comma away from where you started. So let me actually just demonstrate that quickly. So you can do this. No, sorry. I'm going in the wrong direction. Right? And if you look down here, you see that this is at 434.6 rather than 440. I can adjust that by going up the comma back to where it originally was. You can do phrases from, here's an example. I'm sorry, I don't know all my keystrokes yet because I'm not sure where they're going to be eventually. So I guess I haven't paid too much attention to memorizing them all yet. Good. Okay, so the opening phrase of the Harrison Symphony goes like this. So that was starting on the G, going up a 9-8, and then going up a 10-9, and then up a 9-8, an 8-7, and a 7-6. the opening phrase of the other piece that we looked at begins on E, and it goes up in that enharmonic tetrachord of Ibn Sina, and then it goes up in the chromatic tetrachord of Didymus, and then it does a fourth up and back down. So any of those things could work from any starting pitch with the same keystrokes, and that's basically what I've done with this so far. So I can open it up to questions and see if anybody wants to talk about any of these things.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
Wow, what a new aspect of your work. Myself, as I know you, I wouldn't imagine you presenting this topic today. Amazing, yeah. I would like to ask in the group if there are any questions around for Jim, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Jim. I wanted to congratulate you on that. I've farmed similar soil with MaxMSP. It's a very, very deep program. An advanced user once told me there are no such thing as an advanced max user. There's just different levels of intermediate.
Right.
Because there's so many ways you can go with what you're doing. I always compare the Max program to like a circular lobby in a large building. And there's all these different corridors you can go down. The corridor of graphics, the corridor of data, the corridor of sound design, the corridor of music composition. And each of them deal in the same currency, which is numbers. So if you stand in that circular lobby with a handful of numbers that you have mined from somewhere, those same numbers can go simultaneously down different corridors. So I would encourage you to kind of look at what you're doing that way, because it can be represented graphically in presentation mode in Max, where you don't have to have someone look at all of the spaghetti of the patch cables.
Right.
And you can then choose, okay, the user, and I think at least the older versions of Max had a way of kind of freezing the parameters of the program, and then you can give it to somebody. I forget what it was. There was a particular way that you can kind of export your final patch. And so somebody wouldn't be able to open it up and change it, but they could use it. So I think Max even allows for that sort of standalone capability.
Yes, it still does. That is in my plans to do, of course, when I get this all cleaned up and totally functional. But I'd have to decide which of the aspects are visible to the user, right? So and how to do things involving presets, for the various intervals or things like that. But thank you. Yes, there are amazing things that could be done with this, and I'm just getting started, and it seems like there's almost an infinite variety of things you could do.
No, I'm very excited for you, and I think I think you've really tapped into something. This whole idea of sort of freedom of pitch, the fact that we no longer have to stay locked in to a fixed array of pitches. Why not make a decision midstream to say I really need a 10-9 right here, and not have to be limited to a predetermined frozen structure of notes. I think that's very exciting. I can sympathize why Lou Harrison's piece was so short, because that really takes a lot of forethought as to like, wow, how do you get from here to there? And you can and I sympathize with Harry Park saying it makes him dizzy, because it's very, very easy to get disoriented in such a dynamic. But I think you tapped into something really exciting, and I look forward to seeing what else you do with it.
Great, thank you.
Hans Gunther, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really a brilliant patch with minimal structure. So this is I use Max for around 15 years, of course, and of course it's really brilliant to demonstrate how we shift away when we freely use the ratios. But of course. The standalone is easy to do, and but one problem is, even if you have very small patches with really nothing, it will the files are very big, so 300 megabyte. Of course, if you deliver that, and sometimes it makes more sense that the people download Max and then run it, because if you can Max run without any problem. If you have no license, just cannot change patches and save it. Just saving is disabled. So depends what to do. If you deliver just one to one, and it's okay. But if you think that you have a number of different projects, and then every project is 300 or 400 megabytes, it's a bit large.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry. Eleni has also a question.
Let me just lower my hand. It's not a question, it's more a remark. First of all, it's thank you for the wonderful presentation and for your work. It looks very interesting. Because I'm working in the archive, I discovered a lot of material concerning the relationship of Harry Parts and Lou Harrison, and I would like to tell you that if you ever have interest in looking into that, you can always text me and I can send you, because it's very interesting. I mean, Lou Harrison was highly appreciated, and they had like a very strong friendship that all got out of the personal into the artistic. So if you ever need anything, please let me know.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I probably will contact you about that.
Oh, that's great. Any other questions, please? Any comments? I mean, I saw here, I'm not reading the chat so often because of my eyes, but there's a compliment by Caroline Delume. Very interesting. Thank you. Juhani, wow. Okay, volume. Okay, and that was from the previous ones, yeah. Sorry, I don't keep all the comments on the chat. Any other comments? And how long will you've been working for 1 year now with MaxMSP, Jim?
Just about a year, yes. Okay. And I started just by trying to learn how to use it, and with the assumption that there would be something that would be interesting and useful to me in it. And I made a few other things that have been somewhat useful, but then when I figured out that I could do this, then I turned all of my focus to doing just this right now. I guess about 6 months ago, I applied for the sabbatical at the conservatory with it. So since then, I've been putting in even more time with it, trying to get it together. So,
well, that means that your sabbatical is only halfway. Did you still?
It's actually for next semester, so it's just beginning now.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes. Wow. Yeah. Any more questions or comments? Maybe. Hans Gunther, please.
Yeah. Congratulations. I'm also next semester in a sabbatical. But by the way, yes, when I comment MaxMSP, of course, MaxMSP is very good for people. They have a visual understanding of the world. So if you like this cable link and you follow this, and it's easy to debug, to put a number box for the control what has happened there, and you can do this type of intuitive program. You don't have to design it before and think about everything, that nothing goes wrong. If something goes wrong, you look and you can understand easily where it goes wrong, and that makes it, of course, in my opinion, makes it good for pedagogical, especially for musicians. They have mostly no background in computer programming. But of course, I have also seen people, they don't like that, and they like more. They are excited about text coding and this old text style programming. It's really depend how somebody likes to express, or likes to express the thoughts, or likes to learn this logical situation what you have in every programming language. And of course, the disadvantage of Max is, of course, if it becomes more complex. So the patches are becoming totally messy. If you have really, and you cannot also do, or if you had just one loop in your programming, so just one recursion. But if you imagine you have to program a recursion in a recursion and then a recursion to another. So if you have something what needs a large amount of recursions, then it's for me it starts. I become crazy. And maybe that thing will be more better overview if you program it in some other language.
Mm. Certainly. Thank you.
Sorry. Any other questions in the group? Maybe one last question for Jim. And yes, we really missed you, Jim. Last time I was in touch with Maggie about your health 2 years ago. She was informing us all the time. And yeah, we were very happy that you recovered very well. Yeah,
thank you.
Hopefully we'll see each other in 2 years if you have the possibility. That would be excellent. Yeah.
Sounds good. I hope so. Yeah. Thank you so much.
One very last question. Maybe some comments from anyone. Okay, otherwise we can only wish you lots of luck with this amazing, fascinating work. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing your work with us here. And enjoy, like Gunther said, congratulations for your sabbatical year. And enjoy it, yeah. And keep up the good work, Jim. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Okay, so we move a little bit forward to our last symposium, our last presentation of second block. So we are about to hear Polytone and Other Microtonal Intermedia by Daniel Corral. I mean, I'm guessing that Daniel Corral is the way you pronounce. He might correct me. Daniel Corral's music has been commissioned and presented by venues such as the Brooklyn Academy of Music, Sundance Film Festival, Banff Center for the Arts and Creativity, Joe's Pub, Red Cat, Iceland University of the Arts, etc. Corral has collaborated with artists such as Anne de Baron, Vicky Ray, Charles Gaines, Stephen Prina, Wild Up, Isaura String Quartet, Christine Marie, Formalist String Quartet, Opera Povera, Dog Star Orchestra, Yakina Chamber Symphony, Boston Microtonal Society, Slatua, the Industry LA, California ER Unit, Pasadena All Saints Choir, and Sojourn Theater. Corral is also the lead composer for Timur and the Time Museum, who are produced by Beth Morrison Projects. Corral is on the composition faculty at Col Arts and was designated by the Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs to be a 19 and 20 cultural trailblazer. Past residencies include Apex, Marine Headlands Center for the Arts, iPark Foundation, the Banff Center for the Arts and Creativity, and Gerasi. His music has been released by Populist Records, Orenda Records, Innova Recordings, The Wolf Records, and independently, with an upcoming album on Microfest Records. Many regards to John Schneider. His MFA is from Cal Arts, and his teachers include James Tenney and Anne Le Baron. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Daniel Corral.
Thanks, Augustine. Thanks for having me here. It's been really great seeing the presentations I've been able to catch, and I hope to catch the other ones on video. Haven't had a lot to say, but it's been really great to listen and hear everybody's expertise here. The presentation I have is actually, I just recorded it. It's pre-recorded. It's exactly 27 minutes. And so I'm going to share my screen and play that. Hopefully I don't speak too quickly. Can I share my screen?
Please.
Yeah, it looks like I can. I'm able to.
The little boy, no, it happens to us all the time. The little boy, audio, I'm sure you know.
Yeah. Let's see. I told it to share sound as well, so that should be working too. One moment. I just want to make sure if anything comes up in the chat here, I have that as well. Okay. So yeah, there's a 27-minute presentation about this piece called Polytope, and I talk about some of the other pieces that sort of influenced that piece as well. So I'm going to just start it. Please let me know if you don't hear well, I guess my voice, and I'll mute my microphone and just start this video. My goal today is to describe the compositional and performance practices involved in my 2018 piece, Polytope. This microtonal multimedia piece is performed by 4 musicians playing Launchpad Pros in total darkness with live feed video and electronic 4-channel sound. First, I'll introduce the musicians who premiered Polytope. I had specific players in mind when I composed it, and knowing their capabilities informed what I wrote. The performance setup also had a big influence on the piece, so next I'll describe how this mode of presentation has developed in my creative practice leading up to Polytope. After that, I'll describe the process of rehearsing Polytope. Since the piece has no traditional score, it had to be learned orally during rehearsal. Polytope premiered at Automata LA on March 18th of 2018 as part of Microfest. I had originally met with Microfest board member Bill Alves in March of 2017 to discuss making Polytope part of the following year's Microfest concert season. That meeting was part of a longer trajectory, continued from a recent residency at the Banff Center in January of 2017. While in Banff, I had started to work on Polytope with 4 Launchpad Pros that Novation had lent me. I made several short video demos that I used to book performances of Polytope. Around the same time that I met with Bill, I also met individually with a few musician friends that I wanted to play Polytope with me. Andrew Lessman, Corey Beers, and Aaron Barnes. Over tacos and or beer, they each said that they'd love to be part of the group. In order to play Polytope, musicians need specific skill sets, some of which are outside of typical classical training. When forming my Polytope group, some traits I considered important were experience performing musical minimalism, a good sense of rhythm, which not only means an ability to lock into a rhythmic pulse and play in odd time signatures, but also means an attentiveness to space and process. Good with new musical interfaces. Besides the fact that the launchpads are drastically different from a piano keyboard, the software setup is idiosyncratic enough that it's not feasible for most players to bring the launchpads home to practice. Thus, they need to be able to learn the piece in rehearsal only. And also an ability to learn the piece orally. Not only is Polytope difficult to practice, it has to be memorized and there's no score in standard notation. Considering these traits led me to the following group. Aaron Barnes is the diamond marimba player in the LA-based Parch Ensemble, and also a hiking buddy. Corey Beers is mostly known as a cymbalum player, but is also a fantastic percussionist. And Andrew Lessman is a jazz and rock drum set player whom I've worked with for years. These musicians have played in all performances of Polytope except one. For a performance on March 1st, 2020, drummer Trevor Andrees and composer Federico Locke subbed for Aaron Barnes and Corey Beers. Since neither Trevor nor Federico had played Polytope before, I had multiple one-on-one rehearsals with both before we met as a full group with Andrew. In July of 2017, we had 2 initial rehearsals, during which I introduced the sections of Polytope that I had finished thus far. I showed everyone their respective parts, made sure they understood them, and then we tried to play them slowly. We came across some unexpected physical limitations that needed to be addressed. Aaron, Corey, and Andrew were all percussionists, and they were used to using between 2 and 4 sticks or mallets. This made them very adept at using up to 2 fingers per hand, but less comfortable with more than that. In addition, some sections of Polytope had to be slowed down. I had reused some material from an earlier solo piece, and it wouldn't be feasible to ask others to learn it at the original tempo. I had not yet decided on whether we would stand or sit when performing. I stood for all of my solo Launchpad pieces, with the Launchpad Pro sitting on a PVC mount that itself rested on an X-shaped keyboard stand. After confirming that the rest of the group also preferred to stand, I made a similar setup for Polytope. This might be a good time to talk about the Launchpad-based setup. I began working with Novation Launchpads in 2014 because the Launchpad Mini was cheap. I wanted to make a demo of a Microtonal Plinko game sound installation, in which the wooden dowels are all replaced with piano wire tuned to a JI tonality diamond. $500. To visualize this Plinko game, I turned the Launchpad 45 degrees to emulate a tonality diamond. James Tinney had encouraged me to read Parch's Genesis of Music back in 2005, though I didn't get to it until 2008. That year, I had a regular 45-minute train ride from Highland Park to Hollywood in Los Angeles to teach after-school art, and the consistent rhythm of that commute gave me plenty of time to read. However, it took me until 2015 to complete a piece that incorporated Parch's ideas and that I was happy with. I made the following score for the Microtonal Plinko installation. To imagine the layout of the installation, one should turn the score 90 degrees clockwise. As the puck descends the face of the installation, it would travel through 10 tonality diamonds with limits of 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 11, 9, 7, 5, and 3. This increasing and decreasing complexity creates an ABA arch form within which the Plinko puck stochastically plays whichever pitches gravity dictates. I conceived of this installation while in residence at the Marin Headlands Center for the Arts, where I had an expansive studio space. After the residency, it was painfully clear that I had no room for large physical art objects. However, I realized that I could perform the Plinko score on the Launchpad Mini, and that performance became Diamond Pulses. This was also when I added live feed video, but I'll discuss that later. I designed Diamond Pulses to be portable for touring. Without the PA or a projector, the setup fits in a carry-on suitcase with my clothes and other items. After a Novation representative saw me perform Diamond Pulses on Dublab Internet Radio, Novation lent me a Launchpad Pro to develop my second Launchpad piece, titled Comma. The Launchpad Mini had push buttons, but the Launchpad Pro has velocity-sensitive pads, bringing it a little closer to a playable musical instrument. While the notes in Diamond Pulses change as the piece progresses through multiple tonality diamonds, Comma instead uses only 14 different pitch classes and a single tuning system of stacked just fifths. This change was clearly influenced by the shape of the Launchpad Pro, while Diamond Pulses used the Launchpad Mini to demo a pre-existing idea. When Novation saw Comma, they lent me 3 more Launchpad Pros to develop Polytope during my 2017 residency at the Banff Center. I originally planned to spend my time at Banff designing a series of multi-dimensional pitch lattices for Polytope. However, as I explored several options, nothing felt or sounded right. So, I based Polytope on a 15-limit tonality diamond, which immediately sounded how I wanted. To vary the frequencies, I brought the top launchpad and the right launchpad up 1 octave and lowered the right and left launchpads by 12 cents to give them a slight shimmer akin to the violin stop on an accordion. To perform Polytope, I run Pure Data and Ableton Live simultaneously. Ableton controls the sound, while Pure Data controls the lights of the Launchpad and some MIDI routing to Ableton. While my past Launchpad pieces were made in MainStage, Ableton's Session View proved to be the most efficient way to write this loop-based music on 4 simultaneous instruments. While Ableton is more functional than MainStage, this causes it to have slightly more latency. Because of this latency, we discovered that the best way to stay in rhythmic sync is to listen to the sounds of our fingers tapping the pads of the launch pads, rather than the sounds coming from the speakers. This highly localized sound is quiet enough to be hidden from the audience, who instead hear the electronic sounds through the speakers. I programmed all of the pitches in Ableton's sampler, starting from a recording of a sine wave. Each player's instrument can switch between 2 possible dynamic envelopes, one with a very short attack and a medium release, referred to here as a pulse, and the other with both a long attack and a long decay, referred to as a swell. Originally, I changed each player's envelope manually with 4 buttons on a soft step foot controller. This was useful in composing, but for performance, I streamlined the process in Pure Data so that a single button on the soft step would sequence through all of the sections in Polytope. In my performance setup, an overhead camera is pointed straight down at the launch pads, picking up the lights of the launch pads and the silhouettes of the player's fingers. A goal for all of my launchpad pieces is to explore different spatial metaphors for music, and with Polytope, this reorientation began immediately. Due to the placement of the Launchpad's USB port, they all had to be turned 315 degrees to fit together snugly. When arranged properly and viewed from above, the notes at the center of the quartet are highest in pitch, while those at the outer perimeter are lowest. In addition, the pitches on each Launchpad go from low to high as you play from right to left. My decision to make live feed video part of these performances was partially inspired by my repeated disappointment in the performance presentation of high-caliber laptop music. While I love this music and the musicians that make it, I often find something lacking in the presence of the live performers, often just a seated musician doing something on their Apple laptop. This is also part of why I decided to stand when playing my Launchpad pieces. Having spent many years working with theater and experimental puppetry, my approach drew influence from artist Laszlo Moholy-Nagy's idea of a theater of totality. In this approach, all of the elements that make up a performance are given equal footing, rather than being subservient to a text, composition, or human actor. The theater of totality, with its multifarious complexities of light, space, plane, form, motion, sound, man, and with all the possibilities for varying and combining these elements, must be an organism. Thus, the process of integrating man into creative stage production must be unhampered by moralistic tendentiousness or by problems of science or of the individual. All other means of stage production must be given positions of effectiveness equal to man's. In Polytope, the musicians are on stage, but their direct physical presence isn't the main visual focus. Rather, attention is directed to the enlarged projection of the player's fingers over the launch pads, an abstracted interplay of digitization and corporeality. The music and visuals are both integral, unlike most music performances where the visuals are subservient to the music. My performance setup also draws influence from Wyong Kulet's shadow puppetry, light and space art, Bridget Riley's op art, and visual music by the likes of Oscar Fischinger or Mary Ellen Butte. In the 2 months leading up to the premiere of Polytope in March of 2018, we had 8 weekly rehearsals. The other 3 musicians came to my house each week and rehearsed for about 2 hours. I'd usually have some simple food cooked, like rice and vegetables. We would eat and talk for a bit, then rehearse, and eventually everyone would head home. The lights of the launch pads are the score that the players follow, but they needed to know how to interpret that score. Since it's difficult to represent in standard notation, I decided to teach all of Polytope orally. Depending on the section, I would either show everyone their respective parts on their launchpad, or show them the identical process that I would be playing on my launchpad. During each of the first 4 rehearsals, we worked on a quarter of Polytope. In the remaining 4 rehearsals, we worked on problematic sections and practiced running the full piece. Though it's an hour of music to memorize, ultimately Polytope consists of only 15 formal processes and the transitions between them. When learning Polytope, we focused on those 15 processes first and then learned the transitions. In the first rehearsal, we focused on the first 4 sections of Polytope. I decided not to set up the projector until the 5th rehearsal, so these first 4 rehearsals were not done in total darkness, but in dim light. When rehearsals took place during the day, I closed the blinds or put blankets over the windows. Polytope opens with red swells. In all of the sections with swell in the title, the notes have a swell envelope with a long attack and a long decay. All of the swell sections, except for purple swells, correspond to a U tonality, while all of the pulses correspond with an O tonality. My treatment of the rows and columns of a tonality diamond as formal elements was originally inspired by Arnold Dreiblatt's Orchestra of Excited Strings. In Polytope, a U tonality or O tonality corresponding to each of the odd numbers from the 15 limit tonality diamond is featured in one section. Red swells corresponds to the U tonality of 15. In red swells, the players start at their highest pitch note and play all of the visible notes in contiguous descending order. Each note should be the length of a deep breath or a long bow on a violin, followed by a pause of indeterminate length before playing the next note. I refer to this as playing in rhythmic complement. In sections with complementary rhythmic relations, the musicians play when they expect other players to not be playing. I've used this sort of anti-ensemble playing in many other pieces, and it requires a great deal of sensitivity to the internal rhythms of the other performers. Parts will inevitably overlap, but they should never be played in rhythmic unison. All of the swells or pulses sections progress by the visible line shrinking or growing. I use a foot controller to progress through the piece, and this progression is mostly based on my own internal rhythm. However, I also try to be sensitive to what the other players are doing. In red swells, I try to wait until all the players are playing notes that will not disappear in the next scene. Each section of Polytope has clear rules that are simple to follow once they are learned. The transitions between sections are trickier. Whenever the transitions are staggered, my part is usually the first to change. This way, the other players are reminded of what section comes next. This is true for the transition to square. Square changes the envelope from a swell to a pulse, with a short attack and a medium release. In square, all of the players do the same parallel process in the same rhythmic pulse. However, their individual downbeats will vary, similar to Terry Riley's in C. In square, the musicians play every visible horizontal row on their launchpad from right to left and from low to high. When a row appears or disappears, players adjust their rhythmic cycle accordingly. If they are playing a row and it disappears, they finish that row and then move on. While the swells and pulses relate directly to the underlying tonality diamonds, the shape sections do not. Instead, more complex harmonies arise. Square ends with each player playing a horizontal white line of 8 notes. In the following transition to red pulses, there is a slight retardando in preparation for the later circle section. The white line disappears, one note at a time, as the red line grows, and eventually the red line takes over. The notes in red pulses correspond to an O tonality of 13. In this section, the players choose any 2 visible notes and repeat their chosen notes on a shared pulse. They start at pianissimo, crescendo to forte, and then decrescendo again. These gestures are played in the same sort of rhythmic complement as the swell sections, and with approximately the same durations of gestures and rests. Players only change notes between gestures. I trigger each player's transition to red pulses when my own gesture is at its loudest, so that the players are less likely to play in parallel. A unison transition brings the players to section 1 of circles. The pure data programming for circles was taken straight from my earlier solo piece, Comma. In the circle section of Polytope, the musicians play identical material in a counterclockwise hocket. There are 3 parts to circles. The first part has a single 4-note cycle, the second part adds a 12-beat cycle, and the third adds a 20-beat cycle. Transitions within circles always occur when the red, orange, and yellow diamonds align vertically from the player's perspective. Sections 1 and 2 repeat until I cue the transition. Leading up to the transitions, I whisper 1, 2, 3, and then press the foot pedal to cue the next section. The full rhythmic cycle of section 3 is played only once. In this part, the red diamond's 20-beat cycle repeats 3 times, the orange diamond's 12-beat cycle repeats 5 times, and the yellow diamond's 4-note cycle repeats 15 times. When this cycle completes, there is a unison transition to the coda of circles. While circles is conceptually simple, it is quite challenging to play. Before every performance, the group always runs circles slowly as a warm-up. Learning these 4 sections was enough material for one rehearsal, so we called it a day and everybody went home. When we met the following week, we started by reviewing the previous week's material. Then we moved on to Orange Swells, which has a U tonality of 11. I transitioned to Orange Swells first, and the other players see the process in my part. Players choose any 3 visible notes and play them in rhythmic complement. As the section progresses, the notes disappear from the middle of each player's line. Player 3 transitions to arrows first and dictates the tempo. This section can't be too fast because player 4 has a very difficult part at the end of arrows. The meter in this section alternates between 3/4 and 6/8, and everyone starts in unison, but players 2 and 4 soon start playing more intricate polyrhythms. This section requires a lot of rehearsal, especially for player 4, who has to play an unchanging group of 3 in one hand, while the other hand alternates between 3/4 and 6/8. This particular rhythm came from another earlier Launchpad piece called One Line, which pianist Vicky Ray played at Pianospheres in April of 2018. This was the first time one of my Launchpad pieces was played entirely by someone else. I was using the Launchpad Pros to perform Polytope at the time, so I couldn't lend one to her. So, instead, I wrote out the part as piano music and she learned it that way first. In the transition from arrows to orange pulses, my part changes first. Orange pulses corresponds to the O tonality of 9. In this section, players choose any 3 notes and play upward arpeggios in time with arrows. Player 4 is the last one to transition. I follow their part, and when the rhythmic cycle is coming to an end, I give them an audible breath and head nod to guide their transition to orange pulses. The lines in orange pulses shrink from both ends, and eventually player 2 is the first to transition to purple swells. Unlike other swell sections, there is no U tonality underneath purple swells. Instead, every time a player releases a note, Pure Data chooses a new random note for them to play next. This is the easiest section to play, and is a chance for everyone to take a mental breather. By the time we reach this section in performance, my right foot has often fallen asleep. In order to keep my left foot hovering above the soft step pedal, I stand in practically the same position throughout the piece. Since there are no scene changes in purple swells, I can shift my posture and shake out my legs. The following week, we again started by reviewing what we had done in the last few weeks. Then, we worked on yellow pulses, which corresponds to a 7 O tonality. In yellow pulses, all of the players choose any 4 visible notes and play descending 4-note arpeggios. Unlike the other pulses sections, the players should never have a shared pulse, and they're allowed to speed up or slow down at will. As this yellow line becomes uneven, the players follow it, continuing the same process as before. When the visible notes form a horizontal line from the player's perspective, I start playing in a set tempo. The other players individually lock into my pulse, and once they do, square 2 starts. The rules for square 2 are identical to the first square, but in reverse. Musicians play every visible note from left to right, and one row at a time in descending order. The end of square 2 has lots of low integer JI intervals in a low register, which sounds really great when a venue has a sub. As the process of square 2 ends, players 1 and 3 transition to blue pulses and green swells. This is the only section that has both a U tonality and an O tonality. The green swells are played by players 2 and 3 and have a 5 U tonality. The musicians play swells of any 4 visible notes. The blue pulses are played by players 1 and 4 and have a 3 O tonality. These players choose any 5 notes and play ascending 5-note arpeggios. During this section, I gradually accelerando to the tempo of the next section, titled Green Line. The Green Line section features the musicians playing in visual unison, but only from the audience's perspective. In order to play the same part as player 1 on the bottom of the screen, player 3 must play the same part upside down, while players 2 and 4 must play it at plus or minus 90 degrees. Though the size of the shape changes, the meter is consistently 13/8, as 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. I only trigger scene changes at the moment when the players first enter the 4-beat square in the center. This gives them a few beats of warning before starting the new pattern. At the end of Green Line, all of the players loop the center 4 notes. In the 4th week, we again started by reviewing past material. Then, we pick up from the ending 4 notes of Green Line, which go straight into Red Line. In Red Line, players 1 and 3 change their meter before players 2 and 4. Everyone should have a different downbeat, and if the downbeats of 2 players match, one of them should restart their pattern from the beginning. We first practiced this section very slowly, but once everyone figured out a good fingering, it was simple to play at tempo. Once all the players' registers have reached their highest and lowest notes, then there is a retardando to the tempo of the coda. In coda, everybody plays octaves. It is surprisingly difficult because you have to quickly cross the entire length of the launch pad. Out of necessity, we decided to slow this section down. As in Red Line, players 1 and 3 change first, followed by players 2 and 4. The vertical lines shrink from the top down, and the changing polyrhythms are more explicit than in Red Line. When there are only a few notes left, I'm the first to transition to white swells, which has an O tonality of 1. In this section, the musicians play dyads of contiguous notes. These notes are in 4 groups, and the musicians play these groups in descending order. The line shrinks by 2 notes as the section progresses until there are only 2 notes left. At this point, players alternate between those 2 notes. When there is only 1 note left, everybody plays swells on that 1 note until I trigger the last scene, which has no visible notes. Players individually finish their last swell, and those notes are allowed to decay in the darkness. Having spent a month learning all of the sections in Polytope, we spent the remaining 4 rehearsals working on difficult sections and practicing running the whole piece. We also started rehearsing in darkness with the live feed video. Though there have been many good performances of Polytope, I've never been able to get satisfactory documentation of it. We had planned to record a high-quality video in summer of 2020, but with pandemic conditions as they were, I didn't even try to schedule that. The only Polytope musician I've seen in person, rather than remotely, since then is Federico Locke, who played bass in my Concerto for Having Fun with Elvis on Stage in November 2020. An album of Polytope was released on Orinda Records in 2018, though it doesn't include the visual element of the piece. Now that things are starting to reopen in the US, I hope to finally start scheduling some time to record a good video of Polytope. My future Intermedia performances will take what I have learned from Polytope and combine it with Unity-based 3D animations to explore Irv Wilson's combination product sets. Thanks for listening.
Wow.
Oh,
Fantastic.
I'm excited.
Oh, thanks.
Wow, it's a great. The video is amazing. I mean, you deserve. I mean, I wish we had a film prize. It's really a great, fantastic presentation, a fantastic work that you are doing. Would you like to add? I mean, we have a couple of minutes before going to questions. Would you like to add anything to this fantastic film yourself?
I guess the video that I shot, the video of the performance is kind of blurry. Normally, it's actually quite clear. It's just hard to shoot video of something in the dark, and so that's what I mean when I didn't get good documentation of it. That the footage we see is blurry. It was a good performance, just it didn't look quite the way I wanted. Yeah, I guess I don't really have much else to add. I'm curious what people's questions are.
Yeah, I like to ask in the group. Anyone? I'm sure there are a few questions for Daniel Corral. Anyone going first?
Hello. Yes, I have a question. Hi. Thank you for the video, for the presentation. I missed the first 15 minutes of your presentation, so I don't know, you mentioned in the beginning, but what about the sound itself? Is it like a synthetic sound? How did you make the actual sound?
It's just based on a sine wave.
Right.
If I were to do it, there's lots of ways to do it. The way I just chose to do it was just to take a block of a wave file of just a sine wave and assign it to various notes just in the sampler in Ableton, because you can tune. Yeah, pretty basic, nothing really complicated.
Why the choice for this specific sound?
Well, I just wanted to keep it very simple. Part of making these pieces for me was to also be able to understand how this tonality diamond sounded. And so I wanted to keep it very, very basic so that I could hear it. And, a sine wave being a very basic sort of sound wave, it's like, well, this is the clearest way to hear what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's true. I agree.
The one thing that did make difficult is that everybody's part was a sine wave. And so when we were all playing together as a quartet, it made it difficult for people to tell who was playing which notes, because not everyone was familiar with what the tuning system was. So the way that we were able to really differentiate it is we would present this piece in 4-channel sound. So one player would come from the front of the hall, one player's sound would come from the back, and 2 players would come from each side. So you'd have to listen to the location of sound to really tell who was playing which part.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so it's also about the reverberation. I heard there is a sort of reverberation. Is it also like you add it yourself? I mean, comes natural.
That would have come naturally because the recording of that video was in a space in LA. And so I had some board sound, but I also put some of the room sound in there. So that's the reverberation of the space.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, the recording, if you listen to the album, it is completely dry with no reverb.
Can imagine. Right. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Daniel, is there a specific reason why 2 of the paths are 16 of a tone lower? Like I think you mentioned. Is there any reason why you chose these variations, or did you try others? Would you like to add something?
Yeah, well, part of it was because I have played a lot of accordion, and I was actually thinking of accordions. And on the violin stop on an accordion, you have 2 reeds that are about 12 cents. It depends on the accordion, but approximately about that. so you get the sound of this sort of phasing sound, and it makes it a little bit imperfect as far as hearing the intervals. So that was kind of it. It wasn't a very deep or philosophical choice.
Yes.
That's a result.
Gives this tissue, what we were commenting these days, this little bit, I think it's more organic, actually.
Mm. Yeah, that's what I figured. If you have two acoustic instruments playing together, it's very rare that the waveforms are going to really line up. And so I figured there was a nice way to sort of emulate that with something which is, arguably fairly uniform. And so it just made it hopefully feel a bit more human. And I feel like the humanity of it is a big part of it, seeing the silhouettes of the fingers. And I thought it would add to that.
Yes, very clever. Any questions in the group? I'd like to know. Okay. Yeah, so now after the pandemic, I mean, you are saying you're going to make another video?
Yeah, a performance video of it. I would like to have a nice documentation video of the piece where the footage is clear.
Uh-huh.
And that's what I would like to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody is still around, all the musicians. So I'm just looking forward to getting together and doing this in person. I'm actually seeing one of the other musicians this afternoon for a rehearsal for something else. Seeing them for the first time in, over a year. So that will be the start.
Yes. But I think we are on our way coming back. I think so.
Mm. Yeah, well, we're going to try and be safe with masks and everything, but
Yes. Any questions? Hans Gunther?
Short comment. Thank you very much for a very brilliant project and very brilliantly shown up and described every detail what you have done in the composition.
Thanks.
I would like to hear this piece in a real concert. Yeah, and of course I think you had really very good musicians. I found out by myself this video from Castro and Pollux with Erin, and so I think she is really playing corporeal as I think parts is matching that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And I've known Erin for a very long time, and clearly, if I have one of these sitting here, this is basically a tonality diamond sitting here, and the way it's set up is very, it's very much similar to a diamond marimba anyways. The way that I usually play it is with the 2-to-1 going, I can't do this backwards, low to high, and the 2-to-1 is in the center, versus the diamond marimba where the 2-to-1 goes across, and it still goes low to high, but the 2-to-1's in the middle. So she was very familiar already with the layout and how to work in that sort of system.
Of course, Parch by himself has turned the diamond into quadrangular. What is the name of this instrument?
Oh yeah, the one with a very long name.
Quadrangularis reversum. This what looks like a bigger version of the diamond marimba with a lot of additional lower pitches, and there he has I don't remember in which way, but there is the diamond is also in some way swapped or turned. I don't remember. So this is just this figure of diamond. So it's to find out what is the best way how to use it for as an interface for a different project.
Yeah, and the idea of interfaces and how to make instruments is I feel like one of the big questions for everybody right now. As we can see from a lot of the other presentations, people designing their own instruments, everyone's trying to understand how, especially with technology, how do we make what we can hear and theorize become a real physical reality? And I feel like if I were to go back, there's of course things I would do differently. And if I had a larger budget, I would probably get one of these general keyboards or something like that. But the launch pads are fairly inexpensive, and so there's something very appealing to me about using something which is affordable and available to everybody, and also reusing something that is originally designed as basically gear for DJs, and just repurposing, reinterpreting its use. But yeah, there's a lot about the idea of interfaces that is fascinating to me.
Exactly. Of course, there's a whole series of conferences for that. The NIME, I think you should know.
Yeah.
New interfaces for musical expression.
Yes, definitely. I guess I've been kind of slowly getting myself into the idea of participating in conferences, I guess, is part of it. And then the thing about these is I'm not really, that kind of keeps me from that, is I'm not really designing this well, I guess I am kind of designing this interface. I'm just reusing an interface that already exists, which is a little, I feel like is a bit different, but maybe it's not.
I think it is designing an interface because you use it different from the purpose as an mostly used as a step sequencer, and of course you have to think about how to align the colors, or you swap the colors for the response when somebody is tipping with the finger or whatever. So even using existing gear for a different purpose, that is of course for me it is the interface design. It's not only of course you have not this part that you have to solder and program an Arduino or some other microcontroller, but of course the programming, adjusting, and working with the desired output, that's exactly the same.
Yeah, I agree. It is quite different. Yeah, and it's pretty simple to get the lights to work. I had a lot of people asking me, how do you do that? And it says in the Launchpad manual how to do it, basically. So if you read the manual, you can figure it out. It's not so hard. But yeah, also with I have been trying to make some sound objects, more like standalone objects, which are sort of media players based on Raspberry Pis that'll play some of these 3D models, like these Irv Wilson type of models. I'm still working on those, but I'm also going in that direction as well, of soldering components and putting some of these things together myself.
Oh, it sounds very interesting, and so I hope that you can make this Wilson and all these ideas, because it's to have a physical embodiment of some music theory as starts with the Parch instruments. So I think there's a lot of potential in future.
Yeah, I agree. And hopefully next time this conference happens, I'll be able to present those.
Yeah.
I wonder what Harry Parch would say if he could hear this instrument. He has this diamond contained the ratios from 6 to 11, all the numbers, all ratios with the numbers from 6 to 11, and the Polytope contains the numbers from 8 to 15. Is it right?
Yep, that's right. I don't know. I am curious what he thinks. Maybe if I remember correctly, he chose 11 because it was just beyond what people were familiar with. The question is whether people's ears are comfortable enough with 11 to move on to 15 or something else. I chose 15 specifically because it makes 8 rows, and I have an 8x8 grid.
And your intervals are with 13, but the system could be enlarged to infinity. This is a system that exists 2,000 years. You've heard about the Lambdoma.
Yes.
And that's the same. This system contains Harry Parch diamond as well as the Polytope, and you can develop further to higher numbers. But that's future.
Yeah, in the future, I have to get a bigger grid of buttons, I suppose, like a Linstrument or Monome or something like that.
Excellent compliment.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Okay, so we're going to have a little break, and after this, we have one more presentation and a concert. So we will stretch the legs a little bit and see you in half an hour.
Fine.
Bye-bye. See you later. Thank you.